Вітання з українського.
Good afternoon from Ukraine Crisis Media Center, where traditionally we have the spokesperson of communities discussions, and this is a joint project between the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center and the Dobre program. The issue of enrolling new revenues to the local budgets, to community budgets, and the subventions on road reconstruction, road construction. This is the topic of our today's discussion. We speak with Oleksandr Korinnyi, mayor of Novoukrainka, head of United Communities Association. Good afternoon. Today we'll discuss your community issues and the issues from other local communities, because your association unites more than 100 communities. As far as I know, your Novoukrainka local community comprises half population of the district where you reside, and nevertheless, as far as I know, this is the first year when you live with the budget. So the total budget of our local community was in the past 22 million hryvnia. Implementation of it was 32 million hryvnia. By this year, for the first time we have got 105 million hryvnia. This is a really serious resource for those people who know what to do with this money. While in 2015-2016, people kept asking questions whether we are planning to close the school, whether the library would be repaired, etc. While this year we have refurbished the school, we have refurbished several schools, several medical centers, ambulance centers, etc. And now we are thinking how to increase internal resources. Sometimes my colleagues believe that united community or consolidated community means that you will get more money due to the consolidation process, while you should consolidate your resources and then think what to do with this bigger resource. So why did you consolidate? What were the main objective? Because we had the idea that when you unite with somebody, you take bigger responsibility. Sometimes people keep speaking about resources without understanding of the responsibility issues, and they believe that decentralization means creation of the consolidated communities. No, that's different issue. This means decentralization means more responsibility. We should know where the base schools will be located, what buses will bring children to that schools, where we will have secondary schools, where we will have higher schools. We recommend to parents to bring children to the higher schools in order to open more opportunities for these children and allow these children in future to come back to their villages and become good demanded specialists. So this reflects the responsibility which we take in terms of medical services, how to attract doctors, physicians, etc. After general elections of 2015, local elections, we had to go to new election campaign in 2016, and some more 10 heads of local communities were elected. Do you know what is the interest in campaigning for the position of head of the local community? Why? Because you understand that there are new opportunities. One member of district government who was elected to the district council had withdrawn his candidacy from the new elections, went for elections to the new consolidated community because he understood that all his interests are in another territory. And by the way, the legislation should motivate best people to campaign for positions or elected positions, representative positions in the local self-governments. As far as I know, in late October, there will be elections in more than 200 local communities. How to prevent the splash of populism in course of this campaigning? How people should choose the right people? This is an important issue. I think we have got some bitter experience. There is a chance to get bitter experience, and it may spoil the future of consolidated communities. But people should understand that President of the country no further would appoint heads of local self-government administrations, and those people who will be elected will need to bear all their responsibility.
I stopped listening to the political promos, but as the practice shows, the teams and people who were sent by the community, who saw some perspective in that, they were sent there. If the people do not see any perspective, they cannot be the head and lead the community. If the person knows why the community is set up, then such person will have an action plan, and such people are to be elected. But in fact, it is very difficult to differentiate where there's populism, where there are correct things. And I believe there will be few averagians now. The people who do not know what is the mentality, who do not know what are the traditions. Most often these will be local people who see the points of growth and who work there. We very often and also I would recommend to everyone, to those who are running the elections, be apolitical, because the political position does not coincide with the position of the citizens of the community. But the main thing is, I request all the citizens of the communities, please come up and state your position, because very often, because of the disbelief, people do not come. And then few people, 10, 15, 20% of people decide on what should happen with them. This should not happen. Go and vote. You're right. That's the duty of the voter, to go and vote. And then I believe probably the citizens of Novoukrainka and other villages voted for you. How do you manage to equally distribute your attention to all the villages? When we set up the community, we first of all started writing the strategy of development. We were working together with the Swiss project, How was this strategy different from others? It wasn't written by the experts. The strategy of development was written by the citizens, those who wanted, teachers, elders of the villages. Those who wanted to provide their proposals were providing them. And in the end, before we were approving the strategy, we had about 30 people who made contribution, but everyone then found their ideas in the strategy, and that means trust. And when people say that there is the problem on the territory of a village school, then this problem gets to the program if the director submitted it, and this will be included into the program of implementation for this year. And when people see that this is what will be done, they have no questions. Very often they want everything. Everyone wants it, like lighting in the streets. Then the community says, let's vote and let's select the criteria according to which we will put lighting in the streets. And the authorities say, first of all, near hospitals, near kindergartens, near schools, there should be lighting. This will be the priority. And I understand that some faraway village where just 10, 15 houses are, we will get there, but later. And then there are no problems with that. But the main thing is that we signed the agreement with the population on cooperation. And the first one that was about funding said that all the money we receive for infrastructure and for the development of the community will be used only on the village territories, not in the city. And we will show that we will implement the projects which are in our strategy. But very often villages are afraid to get united with the towns, because they believe that all that the town needs is the land of the village. There's not a single entrepreneur from Ukrainka on the territory of the village. We get together with some farmers, with small entrepreneurs, and we discuss every plot of land. There's a free plot, 2 hectares inside the village. We get all people together, and we ask them, what do you want to have here on this plot? And they agree that this will be the solar plant. And when potential investor comes and says, we want to build a solar plant, we say, we have a wonderful plot of land here on the territory of the village. We will just prepare all the documents for you. When before the creation of the community, we were going to villages and we met with everyone. For example, we went to the pension fund, to employment center, and that's where people work, who contact with people, and that's this network marketing. Every person who lives in the community should understand what it is, because myself, as a civil servant, some people will not believe me because I'm a civil servant. Others will. We went to villages where we just put some chairs to all people. People would come, young and old, and they were asking different people. But we knew clearly. We saw the plan, what we want, and we were explaining to people. I thank people, they trusted us. They signed all these minutes of these meetings. They requested their deputies to support this decision, and we promised them that there will be buses going to them, because in the past there were no buses going to villages. And now in market days, when 3 or 4 days a week the market works in Ukrainka, I believe the bus will be going. Teachers, doctors, medical workers, like in one of the villages there was no medical worker. And for example, the person comes to us and says, what can I do? And we say, you can go and take a bus, school bus there, you will go there, you will have a salary, half a salary of a medical worker and half a salary of a person who's teaching. And the village received the medical worker, and we take person there free of charge. And once you don't know that there's no specialist, you can work with that. This, in the past, was the function of the local community.
I've been listening to you, and I can understand you. So you have almost ensured me that the reform can work efficiently. So I promised to discuss how the consolidated communities are preparing to their independent life. But before doing this, they probably need some transition period, some period of accumulating experience, how to get new resources. What are you doing in this respect? Currently, we finalize preparation of the master plan of our city. First, we had broad discussion with the citizens what the infrastructure projects they need, what roads they need, what land plots would be allocated for what. For example, processing plants, garbage treatment, solar plants, power plants, etc. And there were some entrepreneurs who approached us and suggested to start construction, but we were already prepared to this, and we immediately allocated the land to him. Then we need to look carefully at the social institutions. For example, there might be 17 pupils, 17 students in a school while we plan to develop it. That's useless, of course. Then centers of administrative services. You should look at the population of this village or town, and then decide whether this is needed. This is extremely important to keep in mind where any services or any production is efficient. We also are now improving our spatial planning in the territory of our community. We had a meeting with Mr. Groisman, Prime Minister, and explained our approaches, and we have initiated several important things in terms of budget, in terms of budgeting process. And of course, we do not count that the support from the state budget will be continuous. I believe that during first 3-5 years, when the government allocates money for repairs, for overhauls of the objects, which will create the added value for the future and which will launch the process of further development in local communities. Looking at the financing and funding in local communities, some experts advise that there are big resources for budget replenishment in those consolidated communities, for example, land resources. As far as I know, up to 30% of agricultural lands are not covered with the registering. From the very beginning, we when we have established consolidated community, we immediately started the process of reassessing the lands and registering it. And we have carried out the inventory of all the commercial facilities in our territories. Of course, some people did not like it because we filed cases to court when there were improper managers and lawful managers of the land. The authority, local authority, and its most important function is to ensure revenues to the local budget. Quite often in our local communities, we try to understand what can produce additional revenues for us. The land is one big resource. Fuel excise revenues is also a good resource. Then we should stimulate legal employment in our territories because this brings the personal income tax to our budgets. So gradually we try to attract more resources. For example, we have put into commercial competition the land plots where there are public bus stops, and instead of paying for repairs of that bus stops, we started to get money as lease payments from the businessmen who lease the stops. This year in Ukraine, the debt to local budgets is around 9 billion. This is in terms of income of physical persons, etc. Fortunately, we have no areas in terms of revenues to our budget. then the government had changed the methodology, how fuel excise payments should be accrued and arrive to the budgets of local communities, and now we have no problem in this area. Then currently we have the moratorium on inspections in force, and we have to set clear rules of the game and maybe allow some inspections, because quite often private entrepreneurs, they hire they hire temporary workers, seasonal workers, and we cannot be sure that they employ these people legally, that they pay personal income tax when those people work. And also we took a bigger responsibility for budget expenses. We assess carefully how much we will spend on maintenance of schools, etc., and how much we should spend on the on the maintenance of our staff, between 10 and 30%. Actually, the staff, it's not the authority itself. When in the past, the district authorities coordinated appointments of to all positions in our local community. They represented the state power. While we are not the state power, we are only the body serving the local community. That's why we're interested in very friendly cooperative relations with the people who pay to local budget. The solar power plant, which I mentioned, will create a limited liability company which would pay taxes in our local community. And I think that this is the right step. A painful issue for all local communities is absence of roads, of very poor roads. From this year, the new amendments to legislation will come to force, and some 32 billion hryvnia will be allocated to local budgets as subventions from the central budget, depending on the length of roads in the territory of local community. How did the local communities perceive this news? We had no discussion about this issue in the association of our local communities, because the experience of each local community is different, is diverse, and I can answer to your question as a head of my local community. I'm happy with this initiative of the government to establish the road fund and to give us some money for repairs of our roads. But what I think is important is the clear rules of the game, how the money will be allocated, the length of roads should be the only one criteria. And people who live in the town, they need local roads to function properly, and that's why both national, regional, and local roads should be repaired simultaneously. And before repairing the roads in local communities, we should decide carefully which roads should be repaired in first turn as a top priority. I think it's a good initiative.
People are criticizing. They said that's our mentality. Let them criticize. Once they were talking about decentralization. That's wrong thing. Now we say that we are thankful to the government because they started that reform. Is everything fine? But has anyone changed anything? I once told my colleagues, people meet and they say, great, there are good feelings, then they get married and they have to live together. But the question is where to live, how to get to work, and that's the change of the rules, which is not always easy. Unfortunately, we live in time of changes, but the government lives, so sometimes you have to do it. And the reform has started working, and we have more best practices than before reforms. Same thing here. I believe there will be some issues, some questions, but if we know how much we'll get, where I will be great. And in the end, could you please formulate what should be the final result of the fundamental reform in our country, the final result for the communities, for the country? If you do that, the reform could be made in a year, in two. You are mistaken, because now we are talking about organizational function, that is creation of communities, basic level territorial system, but then there will be more painful reforms like health reform, land reform, budget legislation, land legislation. We have many we have many comments on the budget process. Sectoral reforms will be even more painful, but in the result we need to get capable community, capable to what? To ensuring providing high quality services on their territory. Every community should efficiently dispose of the educational institutions, have adequate water supply, have the waste processing plant, and so on. And every capable local authority should provide high-quality services to people locally, such things as defense, that is what the state is responsible for. But all issues related to everyday life, this should be resolved locally. The final product is high-quality services to a citizen at a place of living. I would like to remind you that we were talking to the mayor of Novoukrainka, head of United Communities Association. Thank you.